This conference will now
This is
be
just
recorded.
introduction about us. So we've been dealing with these trainings from quite a few years from now. So that's just about us. The main goal of this webinar is to just people know, to let you guys know about the reality of containerization and container orchestration. Nowadays, we have been hearing many definitions outside. We have been hearing from many sources. They are just explaining what they know. I heard somewhere Docker could not process these many requests. Docker could not serve these many functionalities. To highlight Kubernetes, they just reduce the Docker functionality. After hearing all these things, we thought of having, okay, let's give a webinar where we clearly explain what is containerization and what is container orchestration. This is the main goal of this webinar, just to let you guys know what is exactly containerization, what is exactly container orchestration. With that, this is the agenda we planned for today. We'll start with evolution of IT industry, how IT industry started and changed over the years, and what are containers, why they are in demand now, about Docker and about Kubernetes, differences between Swarm, Docker Swarm and Kubernetes, and about certifications of Docker and Kubernetes. This is the agenda for today's class. Let's start with basics, right? Let's go back a few years and let us understand the basics again. The first term I would like to start with is server. Everybody of us know server is a process that accepts clients requests and processes some response. This is the basic functionality of a server, right? And next, application. In day-to-day activities, being IT engineers, application is a regular word we use. So a few people say application is a piece of code, a few people say application is set of programs, a few people say application is set of functionalities, it serves something to the end user. Of course, all are true. Application is at the end of the day piece of code that is written in some programming language, say it as Java, .NET, C, CPP, Python, whatever it is, Go, whatever the language you choose, it serves some functionality. It serves some functionality, right? There are different types of applications you do see in market. Say them as desktop applications, web applications, enterprise applications. Different types of applications we do see in day-to-day activities. The software what we install on our systems called desktop applications, say MS Office, VLC player, all the gaming software we install, they're all desktop applications. And when you want to launch a website, when you would like to launch some website, www.ravitrainings.com or nareshtrainings.com, that would be a web application which can be accessed by n number of people across the world. And then comes enterprise application with lot many features. Simply telling, an online banking system, some e-business application, Amazon, Flipkart, these are enterprise applications where you see more functionality compared to web application. Say security, because once you launch enterprise applications, immediately they ask you to log in. You need to authenticate yourself by providing your credentials, usernames and passwords. So enterprise applications start with security, and then session management. They maintain your sessions, you add your objects to cart and all. And then data persistency, even though you don't access the content, it will be there for years. Even though I don't access my banking application, my money will not go anywhere. That is data persistency with enterprise applications. And next, excuse me, and next we have messaging services. Once you complete your transactions and all, they send you messages, emails and all. Typical web applications do not contain all these things, whereas enterprise applications possess all these qualities. That's where people started going with enterprise applications. Nowadays you are seeing many mobile applications as well, right? Different types of applications we have been observing over the years, and mainly two types of architectures we followed. If you take last 15 years or so, we started with two-tier architecture or monolithic architecture or client server architecture, where your application directly talks to database, your application code directly talks to database, it puts some data inside and it retrieves some data, it updates some data, whatever it is, right? It's two-tier application. Your Java program or .NET program directly go connect with proper database, update the details or fetch the details. This is simply two-tier architecture. Initial days when we used smaller applications, we used two-tier architectures. Slowly we migrated to three-tier architectures. Take online banking example, right? When you take online banking application example, I can access from any browser, any machine. It's not mandatory that I should go to the system where application is hosted. I can access it from my local browser. I can access it from my system, my friend's system, my office system, anywhere the application is same. The client can be anything and anywhere here. After browser, we started using mobile apps nowadays. We started using mobile applications nowadays, by using which we are connecting to the same banking application again. You see the same data again. So another client here you observe. And nowadays you are hearing like send message to so and so number to know your account balance. Interactive calling. These things started already, right? Messaging clients also started. And nowadays we are using many pay systems, right? Google Pay, Phone Pay, blah 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 pay. Many devices we are using, many apps we are using to connect to the same banking application to perform our transaction. So here team, clients can be anything or anywhere across the world, right? But here your application runs inside a server where we host the server in some data center like New York or New Jersey somewhere. So that is called middleware because it stands in the middle in the figure, right? So that's middleware where exactly you host your application. And then when client performs a transaction, this middleware helps the application to talk to the database which is in the background or backend, whatever you say, and then it performs a database transaction in the background server. Like this team, you see three steps here: client tier, middle tier, and backend tier. This is simply three-tier architecture or entire architecture. Slowly from client server architecture, we moved to three-tier architectures. Three-tier architectures, we started using middlewares like WebSphere, WebLogic, JBoss, all these servers. Of course, Tomcat sometimes. And we started hosting application in a different way. This is three-tier architecture. These are the basic points that we need to understand before jumping further. Let me remind you the example or definition of software engineering. What exactly software engineering says, right? The application of systematic, disciplined, and quantifiable approach to the development, operations, and maintenance of the software. So if you take a point here, when you want to sell your software, when you expect people to use your application or software, right? The development should be perfect. The operation should be efficient and the maintenance should be continuous. I mean to say, take an example. I'm using some XYZ OS in my mobile. I'm using version 10. I'm now going to upgrade to version 11. I went through a few reviews and all. I didn't find the reviews good. There are bugs in the application code and all. Obviously, I don't migrate my version. I don't go for newer version because it has some bugs. It is a development failure. Okay, concerned organization has taken all the feedback. They released a new version with all bug fixes. Now development issues are fixed. Now the point is, operation. How they are delivering it to all the users. Suppose mine may be high-end mobile. For my friend, it may be some low-end mobile. So this operating system should be compatible with every mobile, every processor. If it is not working properly, yes, there is some issue again. Suppose it is working for some regions, a few regions it is not working. Operations issue it is. Obviously, I don't go for my application upgrade again, my OS upgrade again. That is operational failure. And finally, what if they announce we don't provide any support once you install this software? Nobody goes and upgrades their OS because we always look for performance fixes. We always look for bug fixes, right? So maintenance should be there. Nowadays, if you purchase any item, the first thing we are looking at it is warranty, guarantee, maintenance, right? Support. Without support, yes, you can't expect, okay, I can't go with this particular software. So if you want your software to be perfect, development should be perfect, operation should be perfect, and maintenance should also be perfect. This is what exactly software engineering says. I know whenever we think of software engineering, the first thing that blinks in our mind is software development life cycle. I hope everybody of you know about software development life cycle. So we start with planning, we analyze the requirements, we start designing, we implement the activities, we test, we deploy, we maintain it. This is a regular process for all IT engineers who are into development. This is one of the known processes for us in our graduations, post graduations, when we started learning software engineering and all. This is basic software development life cycle. With this team, let me take you slowly to the evolution of IT industry. How IT industry is changed over the years. Initial days, we started with waterfall model where we started deploying the changes, once in 3 months and all, and it's a step-by-step process. You know all these things, right? With waterfall model, it is step-by-step process. Once you complete step 1, then only you should go to step 2. Suppose your client gave you a requirement, paint the wall in red color. Yes, you started painting. Suppose client wants to change his color, he wants green color now. In waterfall model, you can't say yes. Because in waterfall model, requirements are rigid. You can't change the requirements. Once the red color is over, then only you can apply green again. You can't stop in the middle and you can't start green over there. That's the problem with waterfall model. So once your step is done, then only you can go for next step. You can't take dynamic requirements from client. You can't allow clients to give continuous inputs and continuous feedbacks in waterfall model. And application architecture, earlier days we used was monolithic architecture. Nothing but two-tier architecture, where your components were binded together, tightly coupled. And then we started using physical servers to host the applications. This is where I would like to spend some time. We started using physical servers to host the applications. What is physical server? What exactly this physical server is? Team, as you might know already, physical server is simply saying a big fat server. A big fat server I can call as a physical server. Imagine I have a server, nothing but I have a machine with around 32 CPU capacity, around terabytes of disk space, and 250 gigs of RAM. This is the capacity I do have for my server, bare metal server or physical server. At enterprise level, we use these servers only to host our applications. If you take long back, a way ago, we used to use physical servers to host the applications. Say, I would like to host a Java based application. I would like to host some .NET based application. What are all the things I should have on physical server, right? As usual, team, as you know already, every server should start with OS first. When you take a server, if you would like to install anything, first OS should be there. On top of OS, you should have some Java, as we are thinking about Java based application, or some .NET or some Node.js, whatever the application platform you would like to host. And then when I want to go with Java, either I need to use some Tomcat or WebSphere or WebLogic application servers or web servers to host the application. And finally, I deploy my WAR file or EAR file. Usually Java based applications are in jar var EAR format. If it is .NET based application, you can see .exe, something like that. Like this, I need to build my stack on the server. When I build all these stack, just try to understand how much memory this particular stack utilizes from 250 GB. How much disk space this particular stack utilizes from 2 TB. How many CPUs are really required? How many CPUs are really required to run this particular application, right? If you ever worked with Tomcat team or WebSphere or WebLogic, at enterprise level itself, hardly we give 2 GB RAM for them, 2 GB heap memory for them. That's more than enough to run a simple WebSphere application server or some Tomcat server. They can host Java based applications and they can easily serve the response to the end user. Let us take some OS utilization. OS may have n number of processes. At enterprise level, you run continuous backups, you run monitoring agents, you run some blah 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 agents to make server alive, right? To make sure server is alive. All these things, let's say all these things together, they are occupying around 10 GB of RAM, and they are occupying around 20 to 30 GB of disk space. 20 to 30 GB of disk space, and hardly they occupy around 2 to 3 CPUs. That's more than enough to run this particular application. Then what about remaining resources? What about remaining resources? Apparently speaking, team, we are wasting resources here. We are wasting resources here, as you could not consume everything whatever there with your physical server. People think, okay, can't we deploy another application on the same server for better resource utilization? No, team. At enterprise level, we never deploy multiple projects or multiple applications on the same server. We never do that. We always maintain application isolation at enterprise level. We never deploy multiple applications on the same server. So that option is not there for us. Then what to do? And you may ask me, why should we have this much bigger server? Why can't you take smaller server? Team, earlier days, there were no performance tests. There were no strategic calculations, how much RAM these guys use, how many requests these guys serve, how much disk space they occupy. There were no calculations earlier days. That's why IT teams used to give big servers only. Okay, take big server, run your application, let it consume how much it wants, or remaining things, okay, let it go waste. This is how they used to think earlier days. So that's how they used to give us big fat servers. Big fat servers. That's how it happened. That's what about physical server. So apparently speaking here, we are wasting our resources with physical servers. What's the alternative? That is where we need to go for next level, team, next level of IT industry. So let me go back to this. Physical servers we started using, and every organization has their own data center. Every organization has their own data center to host all these servers. And then in the second step, slowly from waterfall, we move to agile. You know, agile is an iterative model or continuous development model. There are a number of definitions. I'm not going to talk about them. We are not going to discuss DevOps today, team. We are going to discuss about containerization and orchestration. So I'm not going to concentrate on any of these verticals except deploy and packaging vertical. Okay, so from waterfall we move to agile. Then from monolithic we move to entire architectures. We discussed the entire architecture already. From physical we move to virtualization. Okay, what is this virtualization? Why we need this virtualization? Team, in your experience, or when you are doing your graduations and all, when you are doing your POCs and all, you must have seen this kind of software at least once, or you must have installed at least once on your machines. This is virtualization software. Everybody of us know. If you ask me why I used this before, right? I used to have a Windows laptop. I wanted to practice Linux on my machine. I don't want to replace my Windows with Linux. So I installed some software called VMware or VirtualBox, and I installed some Linux based operating system. And I used these guys together. That's what my answer, if you ask me, right? So the same purpose, team, many people used this virtualization concept on their desktops, laptops and all to run another operating system, along with existing operating system. Take this example now, right? I am using Mac OS. On top of it, I would like to run something on Ubuntu based operating system. Then what to do? I installed a software called virtualization software called VMware or something, and then I installed Ubuntu OS and I am running it. So the big picture has become like this now. The same physical server, whatever we discussed, we are taking the same physical server. Now we are not running directly the application here. We are making the big server into smaller pieces. We are making the big server into smaller pieces. Each piece is called as a VM, virtual machine. And the main advantage here I can run Windows based application. I can run Java application here. I can run Node.js based application here. I can run Python based application here. So here it may be SUSE operating system. Here it may be Red Hat operating system. Here it may be Windows. Here it may be another Ubuntu operating system. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. One big server we made into smaller partitions. Each partition is called as virtual machine. When you partition them, each machine behaves as an individual machine with its own application. When it has its own application, obviously it should have its own resources. If you closely observe the same example again, I allocated around 3.5 GB RAM to my Ubuntu operating system. I allocated around 20 GB of disk space to my Ubuntu operating system. So my Mac machine has 8 GB around memory. I allocated 3.5 to this, and rest of the 4.5 memory will be occupied by my Mac. This is how in virtualization, whatever the capacity you have at your machine level, you can divide and share to multiple machines. As we are doing this at hardware level of the system, like disk space, your RAM, these are all hardware resources. As you are doing this virtualization at hardware level, this is called hardware level virtualization. To make this virtualization happen, we have to install a typical software called hypervisor. I hope you might have heard about this. Hypervisor is the software you need to install in order to make this happen, right? There are two types of hypervisors we use: type 2 hypervisor, type 1 hypervisor. The one which I showed you just now is type 2 hypervisor. The one which we install in our desktops, laptops, these are type 2 hypervisors. This is also called as para virtualization also. This is not full virtualization, this is para virtualization. At enterprise level, we install hypervisors at bare metal level. Hardware level virtualization we call. Here, if you want to install type 2 hypervisor, it needs to have some existing operating system already. If you have Windows, then only you can install this. If you have Mac, then only you can install this. On bare metal system without OS, you cannot install this software, right? These are type 2. Type 1 can be installed directly at bare metal system level. So that you can run whatever the applications you would like to run. And here you are about to share your resources to multiple machines. So this is called hardware level virtualization. Okay, fine. Hardware level virtualization is good. Almost it was a revolution team when VM started in IT world. It was a revolution. Almost all organizations started using VMs. There are a few improvement points still with VMs. Of course, the resource utilization will be good here. Almost all organizations started this VMs and all. Now, next, what are all the improvement points of VMs? What are all the things we need to discuss about VMs? The first thing I want to talk about is boot time. How much time a VM takes to come up? Generally speaking, your Windows machines, your Linux machines, in organizations you use many VMs, right? How much time they take to come up? Usually people say 2 to 5 minutes. 2 to 5 minutes may be less time for us to understand, but at enterprise level, when you are in a critical situation, when you are in an outage situation, 1 minute also matters. 1 minute also does matter. So boot time is the one which we need to improve from VM standpoint, because you have to initialize operating system. It has to initialize all the stack you installed, then it initializes your application. So your application is completely dependent on underlying infrastructure. So that's where boot time is very high. You need to reduce it. Okay, after boot time, what next? OS maintenance, because in VM Every VM contains a full-blown operating system. Every VM contains its own full-fledged operating system, complete operating system of full size, right? So when you go for full operating system, you need to take care of licenses, patches, security updates, quarterly fixes. OS maintenance is there. You need to take care of every VM. And after that, there is no dynamic allocation of resources. Say I assigned around 20 GB to this Windows machine. Suppose there are more user requests. It wanted 1 more GB immediately. Being an administrator, you can go and update. But this VM cannot extend automatically itself. Depending upon the requirement. That's one of the improvement points. Dynamic allocation of resources, which results in your system hung state. Your system may go into hung state and application will not respond. Being administrator or being support engineer, you need to go restart the machine, increase the resources. We have to take further actions. This is another point we need to think about. And finally, scalability. When we think of scalability at enterprise level, it's not a small thing actually. Suppose you see, right, online portals like Amazon, Flipkart, these guys announce festival sales and all. Then more than regular users access the applications. In this case, there are more user requests obviously for your application. Okay, respective organization should think, okay, let's increase number of servers because there are more user requests will come. They think like this. Okay, they thought, okay, let's add 10 more VMs to the existing capacity. How much time it takes for us to add 10 more VMs? Say this example. Here, I want OS, Java, Tomcat, and Warfile. How much time it takes for me to take a new VM in organizations? I need to raise a request. My manager has to approve. He will ask me business reason. Then I need to provide a big paragraph of content. I need to provide a lot many statistics to ask for new servers. And then it goes to VM team, their approvals, financial approvals, budgets of your team. All these things come into the picture. Once all these things are over, once you get the new machines, again you need to install OS, Java, Tomcat, blah 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 software, and then you need to deploy the application. The story is not over. Once you deploy the application, again your QA teams have to test the application. Once they approve, okay, new machines are absolutely fine, then you bring them live and you do something called HA test, high availability test, with existing infrastructure, with new infrastructure. The combination should work without any issues. Once everything is done, officially you make it live. So it would take a long time to complete. So immediately you can't scale up your infrastructure with VMs. There are challenges. There are many challenges. So these many things we need to overcome. This is where the third generation started. Where we started using containers. In the third generation, we started using DevOps, microservices based architectures, containers, and cloud infrastructure. What are containers? This is our main focus today, team. Just to take you to this step, I spent some good amount of time, because once you are clear with the foundation, yes, you can go to first floor or second floor, whatever the floor you want. So the foundation is like this. Now we are moving to this containerization topic. What is this containerization exactly? Why we need this containerization? Why people are saying containers today, right? So team, earlier days we used to host the applications directly by taking them from dev machines. Imagine this is my developer machine. So obviously he or she uses some Windows based operating system. They install some Java, they install some Eclipse for writing all the code and to run the code, and finally they prepare the code and they say code is ready and working fine in my system. Code is absolutely working fine in dev system. Now the next step is you need to move this code to production system. We need to run this code in our production servers. At enterprise level, Once the code is working fine, yes, you can take that code to production servers, but the setup will be altogether different. At enterprise level, generally we use Linux based platforms. And we use some enterprise Java. We never use Eclipse and all in production servers. We use web servers or app servers to run the applications. And finally, we take the same code prepared by developer. See, the platform is altogether different. Earlier it was developed and tested in Windows environment. Now you are running in production environment. This is where, team, you usually hear, right? Application is working fine in dev environment and it is failing in production. So this is one of the world famous issues, right? Application is working in dev environment, not working in production. Developers say it is working absolutely fine in my environment, it's operations issue. Operations people say, what is my issue? Whatever you have given, I have taken that only. This is what they say. At the end of the day, again troubleshooting starts, again bridge call starts, all these things go, right? Here we need to find a proper solution for this. Why code is working at one place and not working at another place? Because of environment dependencies. Here your developers might have loaded some jar files, some support files to Eclipse, then only code might have worked. Here they may be missed, and there may be compatibility issues with Java, different versions you might have used, operating system compatibilities with your code and working functionality. Many things are there, team, many things are there. So that's why slowly we introduced QA environments, right? At enterprise level, slowly we introduced QA environments or IAT environments, where we ask developer, hey developer, don't tell us that application is working fine in your environment, let us set up everything here, because we replicate our production here. Say I'm using CentOS operating system, I use Java 1.8. This is what I use in my production. So I use Tomcat 8. So now tell me, give me your code and put it here. If application is working here, then only tell me application is working fine, or else do not tell me application is working fine. Then this is how we slowly started QA environments. So where, yes, we test application before sending it to production environment. So once the application is absolutely working fine here in QA environment, then only we started sending to production. But the challenge here is, in organizations we don't use one production server, we use hundreds of servers, thousands of servers sometime, depending upon your application functionality, or if it is critical machine critical application, something like that. In that case, team, if you want to host your application on 100 servers, you need to take 100 servers or VMs, whatever it is, and you need to install OS on all the machines, you need to install Java on all the machines, you need to install your Tomcat or WebSphere on all the machines, and every single time you need to copy your code to each and every machine. When you do all these things, there may be a chance you may miss one server, you may miss one file here and there, right? That always happens. That is why what people started thinking, okay, why to install each and every piece on each and every server? Why can't I package the working code? Why can't I take the snapshot of working code, and why can't I place it simply on a server? Why can't I do simply on a server? So yes, team, that is possible. Whatever the working copy you have, yes, take that working copy and place directly on your server. Why to install CentOS, Java, Tomcat code again and again? Package it and run it. This is how our IT people do in organizations, right? Suppose if you join a new company, IT teams give you new laptop or new desktop by setting up your mailbox, your MS Office software, everything. Do you think they install each and every software separately? No, right? They just prepare a ghost image or a big image where it contains OS, MS Office, and all the utilities, whatever you want. They just run that image on every system by default. So you get all the software by default. Nothing will be missed. Process will be efficient. Easily they can perform the tasks. The same logic applies here also. When the application is working fine in one environment, say QA environment or AT environment, why to run each and every piece on production servers? Why can't we take the snapshot of this and why can't we put directly in production? Yes, absolutely you can do that. This is where containerization comes into the picture. So the package, whatever we created earlier, that is called as image. The working copy, you packaged it. This is called as image. Once you run it on your server, that is called container. You may ask me, Ravi, you said same content there and here also, but why image there? Why container here? Generally, I tell one standard example every time, team. You have a car in your parking state and you are driving your car on the road. What's the difference between these two scenarios, right? These two stages, right? Your seats remain same, your brake remains same, your steering wheel remains same, everything remains same except your engine condition. Your engine is in running state when you are on the road. It is serving the purpose when you are on the road, right? Image and container also like that, team. Image is a packaged format, a sleeping car, a parked car, engine is in down state. When you run it, it becomes container. The OS will be in running state, the Tomcat will be in running state, and the application will be loaded into it, and it serves the end user. This is how container is your running application. Container is a running application and it serves the end user in seconds. So this is where containerization started, team. How we can run containers on a server directly? Is it possible? No, team. You can't directly run the containers on a server. You need to enable containerization. First, you should have some operating system on the server. This is mandatory. First, you should have some operating system on the server, and then you need to install some containerization software. Right? So this is where there are many containerization software. I'll tell you. Once you install containerization software, yes, you can get your containers and you can run them. There are many containerization software available, team. Docker, one of the primarily used containerization software that helps you to create your images, run your containers, and manage your containers. Docker is one of the primary used containerization software. And then we have CRIO, Rocket, Containerd, LXD. There are many containerization software available in order to help you to run our containers. So we need to install any of the containerization software here, say Docker for now, and then you can get your image and you can run your container here. You may ask me, Ravi, why we have two operating systems here? Here there is one operating system. Here I am telling another operating system, right? Why two operating systems? Team, this is main operating system, full-blown operating system, full-fledged operating system. This is not complete operating system. These are called operating system libraries or minimal operating systems. Here, when you run different operating systems, don't think your application runs on this OS. Okay, it always runs in this OS. Whether you run this container on my machine, your machine, your friend's machine, your client machine, your cloud machine, your production server, IoT server, wherever you run it, the code always runs in CentOS. And as it is working absolutely fine here, it should work anywhere. You host, right? That is where, team, we completely came out of issue application is working in one environment, not working in another environment. If it is working there, it should work here also. Because the stack you are using here, you are not running this on SUSE Linux. Suppose say it is Ubuntu for me. Application doesn't run on Ubuntu. Application runs on CentOS only. CentOS only, and that is minimal operating system, I'm telling you. Do you believe, team, there is an operating system which is available for 5.6 MB? There is an operating system called Alpine, which is Linux based operating system available for 5.6 MB to run your container. Ubuntu, CentOS, these are all available within 200 MBs, right? So these kind of operating systems we use inside containers. They are called operating system libraries or minimal operating systems. And how they become minimal? How can they make minimal operating systems, right? Team, these are the operating systems without kernels. These are the operating systems without kernels. They won't have kernels by default. Kernel will be available here for this operating system only. If they want to take some RAM, they take directly from machine. They want to take some, CPU capacity, they take directly from machine. Here in containers, you never limit resources by default. You never limit resources by default. If it needs 10 MB, it can take 10 MB directly from this 250 GB. If it wants to extend to 15 MB, it can extend. If it wants to go to 1000 MB, it can go. Every container thinks, okay, I can use this completely. That's why, team, here in VMs, we called it as hardware level virtualization. In containers, we call it as OS level virtualizations, operating system level virtualization. When you go for OS level virtualization, all the OS resources can be directly accessed by containers. You can run as many containers as you want because a container hardly takes 2 seconds to start. A container hardly takes 2 seconds to start. Once you have the image, right, you can run as many containers as you want. See, our IT team people prepared the golden image. They can install on n number of machines. They don't need to prepare every time, right? So the same way, team, if you closely observe here, whatever the pain points we discussed in VMs are gone here. Boot time rapidly reduced. 2 seconds it takes for your container to start. OS maintenance. Here we are not at all using OS. No need to worry about it. This is the complete OS. You need to take care of this only. This is just to install Docker software. And dynamic allocation of resources. Yes, we don't limit container resources here. Whatever container wants, it can take directly from host. That is their scalability. How many containers I want, those many I can run within no time. Where in VMs we discussed days, right? This is where containerization has become popular nowadays. All organizations started moving their traditional stacks applications to containers. When you think of container, this is the one that comes into your mind, right? Yes, earlier days when we wanted to ship the goods, which transportation mechanism I need to choose? I want to ship this barrel, I want to ship these commodities, I want to ship my piano. Which one is the best mechanism to go? For each object, you need to find different best things, right? Rather, why can't you put all the objects inside a single container and take care of this container transportation? Why to go for individual pieces? The same logic we started applying in IT industry as well. Suppose I want to install NGINX, some security, SSL, Bootstrap, some static website. I want to install on dev, QA, customer data center, cloud, DR environment, production server, contributors laptop. These many environments I want to install different pieces of software. Earlier days, we used to install everything separately, but nowadays, let's pack all these things, whatever you need on a single container, and let's ship the container. Let's move the container to multiple environments. Why to install piece by piece? Let's move the container as a whole so that all pieces will be directly installed on all these servers. So once it is working in one environment, it should work everywhere. This is how containerization has come into the picture, team. This is the big picture of containerization. You should have your host OS. Please mute your mics if you are not speaking. Thank you. On your host, you need to install some containerization software. On top of it, you run how many containers you want, right? So container is a simple software package or your application code along with all its dependencies. When I say dependencies, remember our example again. To run my war file, OS is my dependency, Tomcat is my dependency, Java is my dependency. I pack all these things together. I run all these things together. So it runs as an application on the whole and it serves the end user. This is where containers are simply software packages or simply your running applications. So these help you to quickly ship your application. See, this is the notation, right? Build, share, run, build, ship, run, build your image, share to whatever the environments you want to share and run there. It takes seconds. It takes seconds to run your applications. For greater efficiency, less overhead, increased portability, textbook definitions, right? You might be aware of all these things. We use containers. We use containers and today's trend is going towards CI/CD, right? Everywhere, continuous integration, continuous delivery deployments. In that case, you need to bring up your application quickly. Without downtime, you need to make deployments, right? If there is some issue with the application deployment, you need to roll back immediately. These things you should do in seconds, minutes. This is where containers help you a lot. If you go for traditional software like WebSphere, WebLogic, JBoss and all, sometimes they take 2 minutes or 3 minutes to start up, to start every application inside. When you have 100 servers, it used to take long time. I have experience, so I'm telling you, right? So this is where containers show their mark. Containers show their mark. These are the containerization technologies we have. We have LXC, LXD, Docker, Containerd, CRI-O, Rocket. These are all containerization technologies. These help you how to prepare your image, how to run your container, how to share networking from host, how to share resources from host. All these things, these guys take care for your containers. These guys take care from your containers. And what is Docker? As I explained already earlier, Docker was Docker Inc. used to serve Docker software. Now it is taken over from Mirantis organization. It is from Mirantis. From last October, Mirantis is the one who is supplying Docker, and it provides a secure way of running your applications in containers. This is one of the famous containerization tools team. Containers concept is not at all a new one. Google started using containers from 2004. Our YouTube, Gmail, they used to run on containers only. Right? So containers are not new concept, but Docker simplified them drastically. Docker simplified them drastically. Earlier days, if you wanted to run a container, you need to configure separate network thing, you need to configure separate resources things. But nowadays, with a single command, with a single Docker command, you can quickly bring up your container in 2 seconds. That's why people started using containers more nowadays. From 2013, Docker started its versions team. From 2015, people started using it drastically. So this is simply Docker. Now this is containerization. Just to take the code, prepare it as a package, run wherever you want. Imagine, okay, I took a machine, I'm running a container, it is working fine. But at enterprise scale team, at enterprise level, you never run one application instance. You never run one single application, because we always look for high availability. We always look for load balancing, fault tolerance, and number of things they say, right? If because of heavy load, if one container goes down, there should be another container to accept the request. If one machine is down because of some reason, another machine should be available to take the workload. So this is where team, imagine a simple example. You are the only person in your organization, in your team. There is a DevOps team and you are the only person in the DevOps team or some containerization team. You take your own decisions. You take the workload, you take your leaves, you plan everything because you are the boss, you are the slave. Imagine, no, there are set of people like this. There are n number of people like this. If they take their own decisions, if they started working on their own silos, right, it would be a problem. There may be some important task, Ravi may be on leave, right? There should be some coordination. Of course, coordinations never work. That's why organizations put managers. right? When there are multiple people working towards a project or towards an application, there will be a manager who takes care of the management, right? What are all the typical tasks manager does do, right? He is the person who takes a decision. Okay, this is this work. Okay, let's assign it to Naresh. This is this work. Let's assign it to Anil. Something like this. They take the decisions. They assign the works. Okay, we are working on it. They always try to get the new projects to the team to explore their qualities and all, to explore their technical abilities. So they get the new projects. And leave management, they take care of leave management. Suppose Ravi is on leave, Ravi work should be taken care by someone. They check, okay, is there any release on that particular day? Is there any dependency on Ravi? If not, okay, let's assign this work to somebody else. Work management, there are 10 tickets all of a sudden in the queue. There are 10 tasks that you need to deliver today. Manager takes a decision. Okay, guys, there are 10 tasks today. Please share these. Okay, Ravi, you take 2, Naresh, you take 3, Chandra, you take 4, something like this. He takes care of it and he manages all the workload. Promotions, you want to go to your next level, yes, he takes care of your promotion. More work is coming towards your team, obviously he raises his voice to the upper management. I need more people, I need more members. The existing people are not enough to serve these many requests. And he continuously monitor your performance and give you your hikes and all. This is a regular manager work, a typical manager work in any organization. The same way, when you want to run your containers on multiple machines, suppose I want to run 50 containers for my application, because those many users access my application, thousands of users access my application, so I need to run hundreds of containers. Hundreds of containers I can't run on a single machine, I need to go for multiple machines again. When you want to run hundreds of containers, you need to go for multiple machines. Obviously, when you go for multiple machines, you need an orchestrator here, you need a manager here. Orchestrator is nothing but a manager, right? This manager will take care of these points. These are very, very important for understanding orchestration. Suppose I want to run a container. There are 10 machines available. Which machine is best to run this container? Which machine suits better to run this container? The same example in organization, there is a Python related task. Who is Python expert in our team? Assign this task to him. The same way here, you need to identify which node suits this container requirement. This container needs 1 GB memory. Which node is free? Where should I run this container? High availability. High availability. So I need to run 10 containers. Don't run 10 containers on a single machine. We have 6 machines here. Run the containers on all the 6 machines. Distribute. High availability. How to maintain desired state. Suppose Ravi wants to run 10 containers. Always 10 should be up and running. Accidentally one is down because of some reason or somebody did it unknowingly. Bring another up immediately. Auto healing. Bring another one immediately. Desired state, this is the final state you should always see. I want these many, that's it, they should be available at any point of time. How to share the workload, n number of users are accessing your application. How to forward all these requests to multiple containers on multiple machines. How to scale up, if somebody wants me add 5 more containers immediately. How to scale up 5 more containers. If some container has internal issue, how to resolve it automatically. This is called auto healing. Automatically it should restart on its own if there is some issue. Earlier scenarios when we use Tomcats, WebSpheres and all, they use it to hung, that's it, they never restart automatically, right? But in containers, yes, we have that feature. Auto scaling, today is Sunday, I'm not in front of my system, imagine, right? There are more requests towards my application today, so I may not be there every time. To increase number of containers, to increase number of uh, containers capacity, this case you can enable auto scaling, where your container manager, your container orchestration utility, whatever you plan to use, it can monitor, okay, CPU is using 80% of the limit or of the capacity, right? It means more requests are coming. You can put a condition, if CPU reaches 80%, add 10 more containers. If CPU reaches 90%, add 50 more containers. Like this, auto scaling is possible with container orchestration. I want to upgrade my application from version 1 to version 2 without any downtime to the end user. See Amazon.in, they undergo hundreds of deployments every day. You never see downtime. You never see downtime. New items will be added, old items will be removed continuously without any downtime. The same way, for my applications, I want to upgrade to version 2. I want to upgrade to version 3 without any downtime. Yes, you're welcome with container orchestration. And I want to roll back if something goes wrong without any downtime. Yes, absolutely, you can roll back without any downtime, right? And how these containers communicate among themselves. Suppose I have my application in one container, I have my sample database in another container. How application communicates with database, how containers communication happen, how one machine communicates with another machine. These are all very, very important. And how to enable security, how to limit the roles. Suppose Ravi may be administrator, Naresh may be just monitor. I have a fresher in my organization. I don't want to allow him to do anything in my environment. These kind of restrictions, role-based security, RBAC, everything is possible with container orchestration. If you run individual container stream, one container or two containers on one machine, no, orchestration has no meaning. When you are going with multiple containers on multiple machines, yes, you need definitely an orchestrator to manage whatever I listed here. This is where container orchestration comes into the picture. There are many container orchestrators available. If you take on-prem, mostly people say Docker Swarm and Kubernetes. Docker Swarm is one of the best orchestrators available by default with Docker. If you install Docker software, you will get Docker Swarm by default. Almost all these features it serves. Auto scaling is not there with Docker Swarm. Apart from auto scaling, almost you can do all these things. Then Kubernetes. People are running after Kubernetes nowadays, being open source, being efficient, being easy to configure and all. People started following Kubernetes more. Kubernetes has all the features whatever I listed here. It has even auto scaling option also. That's why people are moving to Kubernetes. And the first point we need to remember here, Kubernetes is an orchestrator. It is not a containerization tool. Kubernetes is just an orchestrator. It can manage the containers only. Kubernetes software doesn't have the capacity to start a container, to initiate a container. It needs some containerization software in order to create a container. Then it can manage the container. So to create the container, it needs some functionality, right? See, Kubernetes is like our managers in our organizations. They don't work on the tickets. They manage us. We work on the tickets. The same way, Kubernetes is a management tool that manages your containers. But to bring your containers up, to create your containers, you need some containerization software again, either CRI-O or Docker or Rocket. Any containerization it needs. On top of it, you install Kubernetes. So that's why team, people use Docker Kubernetes together. Docker as containerization software and Kubernetes as container orchestration software. Docker Swarm is also there as container orchestrator. You can use Docker as the container management tool, containerization tool, and Swarm as container orchestrator tool. That is also fine. So these two combinations people are using more nowadays in production environments. If they go for cloud, almost every cloud, whether you take Amazon, Google, Azure, they have their own cloud services for Kubernetes. Amazon has EKS, Elastic Kubernetes Service, and Google has GKE, Kubernetes Engine, AKS in Azure. There are many orchestrations available at cloud level, but on-prem, most of the organizations move to Kubernetes slowly from Docker Swarm, because Kubernetes has more options comparatively with Docker. But Docker Swarm is no less than Kubernetes team. Many people are nowadays saying Docker cannot communicate one machine with another machine, which is false statement, right? Docker has all the capacity, Docker Swarm has all the capacity, but Kubernetes has a few more extra. That's why people are running after Kubernetes. Kubernetes has more customizations for network, storages and all, whereas Docker has inbuilt capacity, so you need to use whatever it has. Kubernetes, you can extend many things. That's where people started using containers, container orchestration tools. Organizations started using these applications team. If you see, this is the search statistics online, right? So the amber color, I mean to say the orange color you see is for Docker Swarm, but the blue color is for Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is increasing its mark in the market, its footprint in the market. From 2014, Google handed it over to Cloud Native Computing Foundation, CNCF. They are providing, I mean to say, they are maintaining Kubernetes now. Being open source, you can take Kubernetes, you can use Kubernetes, no license required, nothing. Docker has two editions basically, enterprise and community. Community is open source, you can use it for free, but you will not get any support and all. Enterprise, you need to pay license and all for Docker. So this is where people started using Kubernetes. These are some official statistics of Kubernetes. So people are slowly moving from Docker Swarm to Kubernetes. Take my example. Earlier we used to run 4,000 plus containers on Docker Swarm. Now we migrated to Kubernetes. We migrated to Kubernetes because of more features and all. And microservices adoption is also increased in IT industry. Traditional applications, let us take a banking application. Earlier days we used to use it as a single application, but nowadays we break them up. We slowly break them up, and each functionality we call as microservice. Login can be a separate service, funds transfer can be separate service, mini statement can be separate service. If you do separate services, separate pieces, you will see more uptime. You will see more uptime. If credit card functionality has some issue, you fix that functionality only. Remaining things will not be disturbed. If you want to increase the capacity of funds transfer module on month first, you can scale that piece only. You don't need to scale up entire infrastructure. Troubleshooting, debugging, everything is easy with microservices. That's why team, almost all organizations started moving their traditional applications to microservices based architectures, and containers are the best platform to run microservices. In future, right, in next 2 to 3 years, almost all the applications run on containers only, whether they are on premise or cloud. Serverless architectures also there nowadays, right? Most of the organizations are planning to move to containers from traditional middlewares and web servers and all. This is where microservices adoption is getting increased, so as containers. And these are the official statistics from NewStack website. So I follow this website. These guys provide good books actually for us. So they officially announced Kubernetes is the best used container orchestrator tool compared to other tools. 69% of orgs using each tool or platform, 69% has Kubernetes, right? So this is what it is, team. This is basically containerization and container orchestration. So nowadays, Docker, Kubernetes being one of the best tools in market, people are looking for more certifications. So we provide Docker certification and Kubernetes certification training courses, which are practical courses. I mean to say, outside you generally listen to the course, but in our class, you practice with us. We schedule 30 hours or so. So during the class, you practice along with the instructor. Me and Naresh together, we take the courses. You practice along with the course so that you don't need to spend some time again on practicing and all. End-to-end practice you will do during the class itself. Many people completed their certifications, Docker certifications and Kubernetes certifications. So these are our next plans, next schedules. For Docker certified associate, we are planning August 8th one batch. This is morning batch. So these will be only weekend scheme, not weekdays. And for certified Kubernetes administrator or application developer, there are 2 certifications for Kubernetes. We are planning to start a batch on August 15th, 7 p.m. Indian time. It will be for 5 weekends, 30 hours. And September 19th, another batch is getting started for morning. Every month we run a batch for Docker and Kubernetes team. These are our standard schedules. Once the batch is completed, next batch will start immediately. These are our signature courses. every time, yes, we go through all these things. This is our regular batch. I just wanted to give some information about containerization orchestration today. That's why I planned this webinar explicitly, right? So many of our people who completed their courses, they completed their certifications as well. If you have interest by any chance, please drop an email to this email ID mentioned below. And that's all from my end, team. So thank you so much for hearing us from last 1 hour. Thank you so much for your patience and taking some time. We both are certified, Ravi and Naresh. We completed our Docker certification and we completed our Kubernetes certification long ago. And that's all about this webinar. Now we are open for your Q&A. Go ahead, please. Please feel free to unmute your mic and you can speak out. We are open for your questions, team. Please go ahead.
Hello, Ravi.
Yeah, hi.
This is Vinod. Good. This is Vinod. I'm basically a Java developer. So,
Okay.
what are the prerequisites to do the Dockers and Kubernetes?
Okay, so there are no prerequisites actually. Basics of Linux are needed. That's it. Basic IT industry experience. What is application? What is server? What is deployment? These basics are enough. There are no particular prerequisites. No programming required for Docker and Kubernetes.
I know the application servers and web servers have worked these kind of things. But,
That's more than enough. That's
Kubernetes.
more than enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basics of Linux. Just what are Linux commands? 10 to 15 commands of Linux you should be aware of because these are Linux friendly tools. That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hi Ravi, Sunil here.
Hey, Sunil.
Will you be covering from Docker perspective as well, or will directly go on with Kubernetes?
Okay, so Docker certification course will be 24 hours completely focused on Docker, but Kubernetes certification course is of 30 hours in which we teach 5 hours of Docker because Docker is essential for Kubernetes. 5 hours of Docker and 25 hours of Kubernetes you will get in Kubernetes certification.
Okay.
Yeah, because without Docker, we can't imagine Kubernetes.
Yeah, hi, this is Sandeep.
Yeah, hi, tell me. Yeah, tell me.
I myself am a middleware administrator. So I see the possibility of upgrading it to the Kubernetes or the Docker platform. So
Correct.
as you said, the Kubernetes, which is taking 20 or the time frame what you have given. So basically, the Docker is much more needed before we get into the Kubernetes, right?
Correct.
So what do you suggest me to go ahead with the Docker first and then with the Kubernetes, or is there a possibility that we could cover most of the Docker and Kubernetes as well?
Yes. So nowadays, what people are doing, if your organization is only using Docker, then go for a Docker certification course. Usually, I'm just telling you, not in your case, generally. And for people,
but mostly I don't think. Sorry for interruption, but mostly I don't think so. They are sticking only to the Docker. People are once if there is a Docker, they would like to go ahead with either with the Docker Swarm or the Kubernetes because that's a mandate thing.
Correct. So this is where people are moving to Kubernetes. You know what? Recent Docker edition, right? With recent Docker 1.3 certification, they added Kubernetes functionality also in the certification. So you need to know Kubernetes in order to go with Docker. That's why people are completely going to Kubernetes. Okay, 5 to 10 hours of Docker is needed for Kubernetes administration. 5 hours complete knowledge of Docker we will give you, and then you can work with Kubernetes. Docker is something you can learn with those 5 hours. That is more than enough. So Kubernetes, what I suggest, because it has more feature comparatively.
So will that be suffice for the build so that I can plan on the build with the Docker platform my own?
Definitely, that's enough. That's what we teach in
class.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Because
so
basically we are going to the Kubernetes itself. We would like to implement in our own environment, taking few applications as an R&D or kind of. So before that, we have to make the groundwork with the Docker, right? So if that would suffice with the Kubernetes session, it's okay. Good with the
That's enough, more than enough. Whatever 5 hours we teach, that's more than enough actually. I know most of the middleware team, right? Most of the middleware people are moving nowadays towards containers. My last session, right? There are 4 middleware people. Out of them, 2 are completed their certifications. Yes.
Yes, yes.
You can go to Kubernetes straightforward. No issues.
Okay.
What will be the fee structure?
Please drop an email. Please drop an email. We are giving some offer nowadays, the Independence Day offer, because we are starting the batch on Independence Day. Please feel free to drop an email. We will be sharing you the content as well. This is the standard content we teach. This is for certification only, certification oriented content it is. Completely certification standard content. As they give breakups in certification, that way only we teach all the content. So after which you can go and clear your certification. Please feel free to drop an email. We'll send you all this content and fee structure, everything.
Can you just show us the email page so that we can capture the picture?
I'm pinging here. I'm pinging in the chat.
Yes, please. Oh, that should be fine. Thank you.
And I'm just pinging our number as well. You can reach out to us. Yep. I hope everybody got our email ID.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, thanks.
Sure, you're welcome. Any more questions? You're welcome.
Hi, this is Nagraj.
Hey, Nagraj.
In my organization, we are using Docker, Kubernetes, and OpenShift. We use some microservices.
Right.
So I have, a basic idea of, we use basic Docker commands to deploy on our environment on microservices. Is it, is it mandatory, or is it added advantage of in a resume to of Docker or Kubernetes certification? It's my doubt.
Definitely. Yeah. You know it, right? How there are a few companies, right? They take only certified administrators only for the projects. There are certain clients. I saw many clients. They require, take only certified candidates. That's how people are doing certifications nowadays. And the good thing here is Kubernetes certification is practical exam. It's not like multiple choice questions. They don't give you ABCD options. They give you a problem. You need to resolve it on a server. They give you servers. They give you a scenario. You need to implement it practically. That's why we are introducing practical courses, practical oriented courses. So certification is always an advantage. If you are certified, you practiced end-to-end Kubernetes. That's the meaning. That's why people are going for Kubernetes certifications nowadays. Docker has a few multiple choice questions and a few discrete multiple choice questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the certification, there is any particular expiry, like 1 year, 2 years, or
3 years,
like that?
3 years.
3 years. Okay.
Years. Yeah.
Certification will come from where it is?
Sorry?
Yeah. Once we are doing the certification, that should come from where it will come? From your organization or?
No, official Docker Kubernetes. You need to register. You need to register. So official Docker organization provides Docker certification. Immediately, once you complete your exam, once you submit, immediately you will come to know the result. Kubernetes takes 36 hours of evaluation. So once after your exam, 36 hours they take and they send you. CNCF, Cloud Native Computing Foundation, they provide the certification. We don't.
Okay, for writing exam, do we need to come to some Prometheus center, or we can do it from our home itself?
Home itself. It's proctor oriented exam. There will be someone watching your screen. You will have to share your screen. There should not be anyone in the room. Your desk should be clean. These kind of policies they do have. So you can do from your home itself.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Just on an what is the validity of this certification? How long it
3 years. 3 years.
3 years. Okay.
Yep. Docker has 2 years. Kubernetes has 3 years.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Any more questions, anyone? Thank you so much, team. Thanks for all attending this. I hope you got basic picture on containerization and container orchestration. Have a good night. Hope to see you soon. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you for your valuable session. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.